Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is to discuss how do you manage the overshadowing narcissist? The overshadowing narcissist is one who really is dancing to the beat of oftentimes what you might consider a delusion, a grandiosity, or something that they are clinging to, something that they desire, and therefore really have a identity that is desperately wrapped up in this image. So when we really understand, I would say the grandiosity of a narcissist, really, and how that impels them or compels them to seek to overshadow or diminish others. And then this creates a separation anxiety for other people. They feel bad, guilty, wrong for not adhering or complying to their narrative. It's like all of a sudden you're written into a Disney movie and you're like, yeah, you've got the part, you're in Disney. And then you're like, okay, we're in the Lion King. And, you're not the lion, you're not the king. You're the pebble that got thrown. It's like, I don't want to be the pebble that got thrown. Like you're something about you feels unsettled, wrong, and it's a feeling before you can put thoughts to it. So we're talking about really a baseline feeling first before we start putting words into it. So if you can kind of resonate and get into that visceral experience. When we talk about healing here on my channel, I really do oftentimes want you to understand that there are a real problem for people, and oftentimes these are very visceral or somatic, meaning cellular at the DNA soma level for our viewers, meaning it's literally, they feel it's churning within their body. It's like a phantom organ or something that is causing pain, and they don't know quite how to point to it, how to identify it, or how to describe or follow its symptoms, because it has such a unseen and oftentimes uncharted and unknown influence that it has. And this feeling, oftentimes, it's there, but you can't really sort of point to it because it moves. You can't really describe it because it's changeable. And it's sort of so frequent that you can't observe it. So you must understand sort of the role of in a narcissist who overshadows. There's usually, I would say, something that they desperately cling to for their identity, meaning their I am, which means how they want to be perceived by the world. So it's a facade, a persona, a mask that they think is the powerful thing. It's like a shield that they hold out into battle. The shield must precede them. The facade must precede them. And so when you feel overshadowed, this is sort of their facade that precedes them. And then they want really others to interact with the facade, even if it means painful, being pained. And being overshadowed can oftentimes be painful because the physical somatic body receives it as an attack, as a rejection, as a big old saber-toothed tiger that you've now let into your den. You're now finding yourself in the lion's den. And you're overshadowed then, and you can't sort of find anything that you can call your own. And so it feels very foreign. It's just, there was the comedian George Carlin that talks about his stuff, and then you have very little stuff, and then you don't know where you are. He has a bit about that, but it's kind of like the narcissist. You're overshadowed because it's all their stuff, all their emotional stuff, and you can't see it, but you're literally in all their emotional stuff. So you feel like you're visiting your own house even while you're living there, sort of feeling. You feel like you're visiting yourself while you're in a relationship with them. You feel that you're not welcome, even though you're in your own body. It's these very sort of cognitive dissonance, which are part of the etheric, the emotional, energetic realm. So in the study of psychology, it's the study of emotions, feelings, behaviors, and all these other constructs, which are creations then of the mind. So people then try to deal with this being overshadowed with a construct, which means another creation of the mind. And a creation of the mind is something used to define and describe it. So, but oftentimes it is not the thing itself. So, wow, that just occurred to me. In my study in college, we studied Taoism. We studied literature and translation. And the Tao that cannot be named is the Tao that we're describing or something. So in other words, hey, that just sort of arose to me. So when we talk about the named things, that's just all the constructs of the mind. But that which really is. And so when you're being overshadowed, you're really sort of identifying with their construct, not with the truth. That's why you feel sort of like a visitor in your own body, because you're just surrounded by their stuff. You can't recognize your own stuff. You can't see your hand if it was out in front of you. It just seems it can disappear into an emotional oblivion. You feel that you don't have any presence, impact, influence, what we call, just sort of a quiet observation in I am. And so this feeling that you might not feel that you belong, you fit in or don't fit in, and then so you adapt and adjust, and it creates an inner conflict between sides, again, between constructs, fitting in and not fitting in, and then you're living on a polarity. It's just like an emotional seesaw. And then people are like walking this emotional tightrope, just trying to keep this balance, but it's within a construct that is ever changing. And if you're overshadowed, so in other words, someone who wants that it creates sort of a barrier that that you get sort of stung or pained if you try to move beyond. And that is their stuff. That is their stuff. And you're trying to sort of belong to the being overshadowed. And it creates this inner conflict, which means you have to take sides. And, when we talk about taking sides, then we start making judgment. Rather than feeling individual, whole, complete, and being able to live in that veracity and then just that quiet observation of what that is. Instead, the conflict of being overshadowed, it creates a quiet desperation. And then desperation, which is oftentimes then fueling of guilt, paranoia, suspicion. This is wrong. You should, and then these are instilled that will forever haunt. But you can't really sort of put it away. It's kind of like a real mysterious thing when we talk about being overshadowed, which means you're agreeing that this sort of darkness or unhappiness or this mystery, this unknown, this uncertainty, which is being overshadowed, which means you're committing to never be able to rise or be validated to your strength. It's sort of what you're swallowing in the process while you're being overshadowed. So people will stay in that space for far too long, which really creates a lot of cuts. It really creates a lot of what you might consider damage, or, how do you navigate that emotional terrain? Realize that those really are feelings. It is a feelings, which is their stuff, which is their feelings. So in other words, this is what they promulgate, what they put out there. This is, if you think of it pumping out like a pollution factory, or, like a factory that's putting out some sort of emission. So it's an energetic emission. And then you can have to own and understand, how does it make you feel when you're being overshadowed? Fearful, that I can't think for myself. I can't act for myself. I have to check in with them. I will never know better. I don't have a head on my shoulders. I don't have a good head on my shoulders. I have a bad head on my shoulders. I have a bad heart. I have a bad intention. Usually when you're being overshadowed, it's further designed to someone manipulate and control and keep you there versus, somewhere else. And usually that is a tool of manipulation for someone as a crutch, as a go-to. So just so you'll be there if I need be. But your calling might require you not to be overshadowed. The unpleasantry of being overshadowed might require you to evaluate certain relationships, certain settings, certain businesses, certain ways that you handle and manage things. How does it feel when you're being overshadowed? The narcissist, they love reaction, reactivity. They want you to jump, dance, flip, turn yourself out, throw up. I mean, whatever it is, there's something that they want you to react. And then this might be pleasant. It might be pleasant, but yet there is, when you're being overshadowed, you're having to succumb to some sort of negativity or what you might consider evil, demonic, destructive, harmful, really going, what ultimately, rather than demonizing it, it's really just going in a wrong energetic reaction and direction. And realizing that that energy only has a finite. It has a finite. It has a finite distance. It has a finite density, meaning it is not all that it seems to be. And so I know that this is deep. And so when we talk really about the narcissist, you must understand the role of grandiosity, illusion, and then delusion. And you might have to realize then that you cannot play to a delusion, a fantasy, a falseness, playing up, agreeing with, going along with, not thinking for yourself, not being able to stand up. So even if you've let a lot of that, go, a lot of people feel that they are dirty, that they are marred, that their reputation is smeared. They have some sort of, for being overshadowed, something that they really have allowed to get a latch onto them. But that is not a infinite thing. Especially when it comes to being overshadowed, realize that the narcissist or the psychopath, they need this role of deception and manipulation. This is what they play to. This is what they crank up the volume to. This is their beat of their drum, and this will create oftentimes a desperation or a lack of being able to, for lack of a better word, just shine and just to be. There's a feeling state. So literally like when a cloud comes over or when a cloud disappears. And then where that land is, and then what you make sort of your root, your home, and then what are the skies always above it. So the skies might always have, even in blue skies, you might always feel this propensity of being dark, fear. I feel down. I feel small. So there's these feelings, and you don't have to deny that. That is okay. It's very mysterious. And oftentimes, that will oftentimes plague people because someone has tried to hold a limit or a sort of a clenching on, if you will, out of their desperation. What you're feeling oftentimes is the desperation of another, and you've made it your own, even though it is not your own. But that's that's the feeling. So you can see where the feeling is almost like a stream. It's almost like a gulf wind. It's a feeling, an energy that comes and then is sort of felt and then reinforced within then through thought. So if you look back, I know that there's a lot of talk in this, but if you look back at the African art, I had a good artist friend who worked with, some of the artists who studied like Frederick Brown out of New York and, did a lot of large vases and a lot of large, like mural-sized portraits of a lot of blues musicians studying the American South and that blues heritage. But if you look, and he also sort of, my friend who also studied very closely the African art, and if you look at their fetish dolls or their fetish figures, they oftentimes have these sort of nails sort of hammered in. And so if you look at that, I think, even though I haven't really studied African art, it sort of appears to me that maybe, it's the sort of undoing of those nails. In other words, what was being built? Literally, your shelter might have been built with these nails. Your feeling state might have been built with these nails, like literally hammering it into place with a sail. You might have literally, seen the saw, seen the hammer, in other words, all the tools that went to put in that feeling of being overshadowed and that you will never overcome. There's this feeling of you will never. I think that the narcissist, so what they're trying to say is you will never outdo me. That's their need. That they, and this oftentimes is founded on from a very weak place or a feeling of weakness or vulnerability within them. So it's kind of like, I kind of think of it as like an emotional quicksand. Because they do have an insecurity, which unfortunately they feel that they need to hide. They feel that they cannot express. They feel that they must suppress. They feel that they must pack down, until the point where, you're on 2 feet of packed ice with this person and you're like, this is cold. Ain't feeling comfortable. This is not my temperature. This is not my cup of tea. This is not my viewpoint. This is not my blue skies. This is really, really a dreary feeling. And you might have had them to sort of lock hands, in other words, as part of the building with this. So you used to understand, oftentimes we are then holding hands with this in togetherness. So do you see then how part of your commitment then, if you're committed and then so to that being overshadowed, do you see then how it would hurt one from the inside? So it's a feeling state. So you have to realize and have a quiet observation and really realize what is then all surrounding the narcissist, and that you don't have to give into that desperation. That real success is not that desperate. Real success evolves. Real success will come. There's a confidence. Not a false confidence, but a true and real confidence. It's a knowing state. And then that comes oftentimes from a feeling of lightness and then sort of excited, or I'm looking forward. I am excited. In other words, rather than it being an uncomfortable, you're that same feeling spot, which is within, usually the visceral, which is usually in the abdomen. Usually, find out where like your butterflies are, find out when you're getting overshadowed and that fear, and it's keeping you down because it's trying to communicate, you cannot make it without me, or, there's some sort of symbiosis, which oftentimes is very, it can be very clogging in nature, which means there's a lot of gunk. There's a lot of heaviness, stickiness, dark, even almost like a darkness of matter, which you can't, that the light, it tries to fight with the back and forth. And, it's the realizing that there is no fight. It's just an inner conflict that they try to instill in others as part of that self-doubt, which is usually a mechanism. So if they can instill the gaslighting and the brainwashing and instill that self-doubt into others, then they don't have to continue to do the work. That person can just self-doubt themselves into oblivion. And then, until they realize that they have an area where they do know better, and then they are able to be in that energetic space. So there's a knowing space oftentimes, which the narcissist will not let you share with them. So oftentimes there's this, unfortunate where, the very one, or the very shadow, you have to allow to sort of belong to that, the source from which it came, even though you might have committed to remove that for that person, or there might have been a commitment of heart or some sort of you should. You should do this. You should, there's usually some sort of tenant that is occupying the same space viscerally. And realize to which those tenants do not and should not apply to you. In other words, they're misinterpreted, they're flawed and perverted. They're used really as not an act of growth and sort of evolution, but it's designed to compact, make more dense and heavy into the matter realm where, your emotions will get stuck, which is your behavior. So you have to realize that, then learn how it's affected your behavior, and then stop that somatic. Stop that somatic. I am not overshadowed. And then realizing the moments when you were not overshadowed. And then take that quiet observation and begin to, I don't want to say glamorize that, but give that the same credence and credibility that you had given the fantasy, the delusion, or that whole fantasy or illusion of the narcissist. In other words, that quiet observation, give it that same weight, but in lightness of being. In other words, allow it to fill you up 100%. And realize you're not dissing buddy, disrespecting somebody, denying them, doing somebody wrong, doing somebody dirty. Because that's part of the manipulation that's sort of stirred into the cup when they're trying to overshadow you. You're sort of taking on that and to be controlled or managed by that negative feeling, and instead being managed by the positive is it'll help give you a lightness and a buoyancy of being again, rather than it's sort of pricking. It's almost like a prick, if you will, of your space. So you can usually find viscerally, where does it go? Where is that? And then realize that's usually when someone of violation nature is sort of going above and beyond. It's a boundary violation. In other words, their voice, carried so far, but their voice actually carried way, way, way too far. Just like the narcissist or the psychopath, they always want you to be thinking about them. That's the overshadowing part. So this is the pathology. This is when it gets to, where it's going to extremes. It's not healthy. You're eating cake for dinner. You're eating pork for breakfast. You've just got things messed up. You need to realize that you're not improving your being when you're constantly sort of hashing this out through the thought process. You have to understand that there's a feeling state that you feel yourself you feel yourself into. And oftentimes that is the quiet observation of the feelings. And realizing when they want to spread out, and then when you were not allowed to spread out. In other words, where could who you are as you are not fill up the room, not fill up the class, not fill up, not fill up the mansion, not fill up the globe, not fill up the universe. Where were you cut off from that? And then look at where that is. And see, now you can almost sort of go back and see where you had perhaps even been rationed, what you felt like emotionally rationed. And so you need to manage and have a discipline of balancing of this state, and then being able to, and knowing that you have a twist, a dial, a volume within that the narcissist does not. So like you've got the upgraded phone, you've got the upgraded system that they don't have. Your system has some other knobs, some other buoyancy, some other vibes, which, oftentimes are not glamorized by the narcissist. They are not desirable. Uh, particularly, you have to look at, the discontent of the narcissist and the way that they're always driven by specific desires. And oftentimes this leads them to a pathological need to control others because they're so afraid that if they don't sort of manage that they're not going to come out looking good. So it gives them this hyperinflated need to overpower or overshadow others. So to what degree have you encountered this? You don't have to label yourself a victim. This is life. This is part of your experience. And so you don't have to be like the Wicked Witch of you don't have to feel like the movie of Oz with the whole house landing on you, and you're just, all you've got are some green shoes on your feet, and you're this terrible person. And, so in other words, people are wickedized. They are demonized when they're overshadowed. So you have to realize, to what degree has that been done to you? Especially when we talk about the feeling state. So you really have to really sort of smoke out and understand that feeling state. What does it feel like? Does it have a temperature? So if you can do just like a quick body scan, that is their need to overshadow. They want to be the one who's looked up to, the brightest, the darkest, the baddest, the biggest, the est, whatever it is. So if you're there, whatever you are, plus EST, they're going to try to be over. That's just what they do. That's just how water flows. That's how gravity works. The sun still shines. Anyway, so realizing that maybe you had played that game, maybe you had gotten ahead in that game, maybe you got cash and prizes from that game, as they say. Maybe you got awards, labels, whatever. However, realize that if you're dealing with this, there's always going to be, you think you got a vacation, they have more vacation. Do you see how, and that's the battle. So to what degree do you want that to be your battle? Or to what degree can you say, I'm good? And to what degree, when you say I'm good, what does that feel like? And what does that mean? And what is important to you? So once again, if you do a body scan and you're being overshadowed, what is the where does it register in your body? Is it all over? Is it in your throat? Is it in your abdomen? Is it in your neck? Is it in your shoulders? Is it in your feet? Is it in your toes? Does it affect your breathing, your heart rate? Does it make you, and so you have to understand, when we talk about resensitizing, you have to really identify. You have to get like the encyclopedia for yourself here. Your own emotional encyclopedia for yourself. Custom made. Your own game book, basically. And then so realizing those feelings that you need to let out. In other words, does it make you feel held back? Is it like a rubber band that you have tied, and then every time you go forward, you get cut right here? And then your head juts forward. There's a momentum, and then you go like this. Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Is it ache? Is it pounding? Begin to identify this. And it's okay to face this. I mean, in the privacy of these videos, what you can look at, and you can observe and then manage. Even if this has been there for a long period of time, I mean, you might feel that you're excavating a dinosaur bone from inside you. A piece of coal, diamond, whatever it is, you might feel that it's, something that is very tough. It might be soft. What are the qualities of it? Is it hard? Is it like a wire? Is it soft? And then what is the fear? I am too, and then realize that oftentimes that fear has nothing to do with the truth. And if there's some element about yourself that has been negated, then you are then in the process then of allowing that to terrorize you and overwhelm you and then overshadow that which is your strength. You're allowing yourself to live in that negativity. You're literally putting your toe in and saying, how's the temperature of my negativity here? You're literally entering into it. So you have to realize, that you have to comb through and become more aware of that crossroads, that junction. Is this wimp junction? Is this wimp junction, wish junction, pussyfoot junction? What is this called? And then to what degree then are you, feeling out, are you dancing out of it? Are you changing your rhythm? Are you changing the temperature? Are you changing, the scenery there? Is it dark? Then make it light. Is it a jungle? Is it a swamp? Is it, or is it, what are the qualities? Really understand the qualities of that, because that is the feeling state which you have allowed and then not identified. And that's what brings people down. Like literally, and it can be heavy, like a lead blanket, like when you go for an x-ray. It can feel like a rubber band. It can feel like, people are tied up in a knot, like they're a mummy. Identify that and then release that and let that go. Allow that to melt away through perception, through quiet observation. And you realize it does not own you. That is just a feeling that owns somebody else.